Yeah, look, it's Friday afternoon, so I'm sure you guys have lots of things you're trying to get to versus just sitting around listening to a guy like me talk. So, but first, just a quick to set the room. Who here is founding their first company? Okay, who's founding like second or third company? Okay, awesome. So you got a lot of you guys kind of going back to the well. I recognize some folks here. Matt back there, I met Matt first when he was 19 and working at a company called Ustream, and I was helping advise them. So it's like nice to see kind of, people do this thing that we do, which is like get a bunch of smart people in a room, try to pick a crazy idea that you start talking to most people about and their eyes glaze over and they don't know what it is. And if we can actually make it work, we can actually like invent these things here that like tens and hundreds and billions of people around the world use, and it like makes their life better. And like that's kind of like what like keeps me going and like is like amazing about Silicon Valley is like that's where it all starts. And like it's really easy to forget this when you like look at Mark Zuckerberg, who's now like a decabillionaire, and you look at like Google, that's like a giant company, and Apple that like makes new hardware like there's no tomorrow. And I mean, they just shipped the watch thing today. Who anyone order a watch? So anybody think they're gonna, like we got like 2 watches, anyone think they're gonna like excited about the watch? Isn't that like crazy? Like this is like the first app, I joke, but like all the Apple guys are like mid-50s rich guys now. And so they like drive their Ferraris and they want like Rolex watches, and so they design the Apple Watch for themselves. Rather than like any of us. Like I ordered one, but I didn't like do the midnight thing. I ordered one this morning, which will like get delivered in June, just so I could have an option if it turns out to be cool. But like I can cancel it if it's not, because like I don't really want one, but like in my current job, I feel like it's probably good to at least try it. But if it turns out to be lame, like I'm gonna totally cancel my order, because I don't really want one either. Anyway, so look, this is kind of what like gets me going, and I just love, like Adam just has me come here, and I'm just gonna tell my story. But if it turns out to be boring or you guys have other questions, just start interrupting and like asking me stuff. I can talk a lot about just building your career in the Valley and how you build your network and how you get to know more people over time. And I'll talk a little about how I did that myself. I can talk about user growth, because I did get to work at LinkedIn. I joined LinkedIn, it was about 15 people. I'll tell the story a little bit. And I joined Twitter, it was about 80 people. When I joined Facebook, it was about 500 people. And these companies are all a lot bigger now. So I got to see a lot about like how do you grow these networks, these platforms, these things from really small to really big. And then I can talk a little about investing now. I've actually spent, someone was like, how long have you been at Greylock? And I was like, oh my God, it's been 3.5 years. So I'm now like officially a VC and kind of like one of them. I'm trying not to wear the suit because it doesn't fit me very well. But I'm like now really a VC. So I'm also happy to talk about like investment and investment cycle. I just led the investment in Meerkat, which hopefully, like my one request is anybody who does live video streaming, please try Meerkat. You don't have to use it all the time, but please try it because I think it's pretty awesome, and I think there's room for a lot of players, and it's not just going to be Twitter's game. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for various different products to emerge there, which is why I got to lead that investment. I'm happy to talk about that too, because I think there's a lot of reasons of why we did that investment and what that means and what that looks like with the round and everything else that just helps explain what's going on in the consumer internet. I was just talking to some founders earlier today, about that. So I'll talk a little about that too. But I decided to tell you where I started because I think we all start somewhere. I went to Stanford as undergrad. Anybody else Stanford grads in here? So a couple. I graduated in 1997. I did this major there called Symbolic Systems, which is really weird because it's not like computer science. It's not like it's actually a mix of computer science, linguistics, philosophy, and psychology. And the whole thing that but basically all it means is you don't really want to do any one major, so you just bounce around from different subjects and get to take whatever classes are fun. But the theory of all the classes together is that you think about how people think, and you think about how technology works, and you try to understand the connection between those two things. Because what you got to remember is like everything we build that's software, there's actually always a human operator who's running it. And like this is true for like every machine or every technical thing, there's always a human running it. And so how the human perceives the product that they're using is actually really, really, really important for everything we build. Users tell a story. Users want to, people want to anthropomorphize like everything they use. If they're driving their car, they're thinking about it, as sort of a person, and they put in this input and it gives these outputs. And so like I really just got to study that stuff by mixing, Kantian philosophy with compilers. And it was great. And what it caused me to want to do in my whole life was and I wrote this on my little resume when I graduated from college, it said, create products that change people's lives. And that was it. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't say have a good impact on the world, because I could have created, terrible things that change people's lives too. But that was kind of where I started, and my entire career since then has been two things. One is I never wanted to found a company. I think all of you are so much braver than I ever was. Founding a company means you just wake up one morning and there's zero anything, and you say, today the company starts. And you might write something down on a piece of paper, you might decide that you're just gonna do it, or a name, or you're gonna, and then eventually you go to lawyers and you get it incorporated, and that's another official beginning, and then you hire your first person, and that's an official beginning, or you write your first line of code, or you launch and get your first user. All of these are these incredible beginnings. And I think just growing up, something in me just made me always slightly too risk averse to ever want to do that. But I knew I wanted to go create things that would have this massive impact in the world. So I set my goals how do I find the coolest thing? Every single year, I would always ask myself, how do I find the coolest thing I could go work on, that if I go work on it, it has a chance to be so much bigger in the world? And so coming out of Stanford, is anyone here from Seattle area? Okay, we got one. So I grew up in Tacoma. And I always wanted to go back and get out of the Bay Area. The Bay Area back in 1997 feels felt then like it does now, which is it's a little overheated. I think we're all a little bit in I can literally from my house get my laundry picked up, get food delivered, get everything taken care of at the push of a button on my phone. This is not like the rest of the world. It just isn't. How many, I drive and oh, look, there's a Tesla, there's a Tesla, there's a Tesla. You go to anybody's house, they have nests and secure locks and all this stuff. It's not the real world. And back in 1997, it felt like this too. So I want to get out and go back to the Seattle area. And my now wife, we met at Stanford. She was born in San Francisco, and so she wanted to get out of here too. And I was well, what companies were cool in Seattle? And back then there was this company called Real Networks. Does anybody here remember Real Player? All right, we got a lot of good people who remember Real Player. It used to be how you watch all audio video on the internet, right? It was kind of iTunes meets YouTube meets Meerkat meets everything. And it was, back then audio and video wasn't all over the internet, and Real had the founder, Rob Glazer, had this vision to do it. And I found my way into the company. It turned out, I emailed them 3 times from Stanford, and they weren't hiring college grads at the time, but my cousin actually worked there in PR. And so he then sent in my resume, and it turned into getting a job. And I think what's relevant for this story, this is a pattern for my whole career, is I always found the company that I wanted to go to and found my way in, except for once. And rather than kind of waiting for job inquiries to come to me. Now, you guys are all founding something, so you're making your own luck too. But you'll find this with everything you do, whether it's investors, whether it's business development deals, whether you end up needing to sell your company. A lot of people sit and wait for the jobs to come to them, or they go to the career fair on college and they just look at whatever companies are coming there. But that's not what I ever did. I always said, look, I want to go to Seattle, and Real Networks looks like the company I want to be at. How do I get in there? And I ended up doing that. And that pattern has been my way of doing everything I've done. And just what I'd encourage, never, don't ever wait for things to come to you. I meet way too many founders who are well, I was why'd you raise money from that guy? Well, he emailed me and he told me he loved the product, and I met him and he was cool and he offered to write a check right there. And I'm that may be awesome. You may have just found the most perfect person, but do your research. Did you do your research? Did you figure out who you really wanted involved? Figure out why you wanted them involved? And it's not always just big names either. It's not oh, I want Mark Andreessen involved because it's a Bitcoin thing. Because honestly, Mark has time for certain things, but not everything. It's go and do your research and really figure out exactly who you want involved. But that's how I did that for Real Networks. And look, it was great. I was an engineer. Anybody here write Windows code? So I used to. Nobody does anymore. Used to be a useful skill. I got to build a lot of Real Player, and I learned from my very first product, we had hundreds of millions of people using it. And there's this incredible, it's intoxicating when you sit here and you're debating this thing on the whiteboard, and you're should it work like this? Should it work like this? Should we do it this way or this way? And we were making up features. We called one called auto playlist that would say I want to go, listen to jams for 3 hours, and you give it a couple of inputs, and it would then do it. And And then, we'd see it just get used in the world, and we'd hear people use it. I met my neighbors when I moved into my house in Mountain View. My neighbors were like in their early 60s, and they asked where I used to work, and I was like, oh, I used to work at Real Networks up in Seattle. And I was like, oh, Real Networks, is that Real Player? And they opened up their little cabinet, and they literally had a PC with Real Player running it that was like running their entire music library. And they started like asking me all these questions, and like I have to admit, like that was probably the most amazing moments of my like product life. Was like I'd left the company, like we were down in the Bay Area, and yet these like mid 60s, like she was like a social psychologist, and he owned a hardware store, and they used Real Player like all the time. And like that just that was like my like kicker on Real, that was like we really did affect hundreds of millions of people through audio and video. But I learned one other thing at Real Networks, which was that you have to build a product that users love, and you have to always think about users loving it. I used to go to these meetings at Real Networks with a bunch of business people. And remember, I was an engineer. I didn't like know my business stuff at all. They would like bring these Excel spreadsheets, and they'd be like, look, we make more money when you do this in the product. And like there was one debate that when you opened up the product, whether it went to the tab you were last on or went to the main screen where we could show an ad. And like if you're using a desktop software product, it's pretty damn annoying if it always keeps going over to like a web tab that would like try to load stuff on the internet and show an ad. And we'd even play audio ads, which was like the worst thing ever. Versus like, I'd been listening to like a playlist in my library, and it should just open to me on that playlist. And I'd be like, that's a terrible thing to do. And they'd be like, no, look what the spreadsheets show. If we do this, we make this amount of money. If we do your idea, we make this amount of money. And I was like, how do I show that there are like zeros at the end of your spreadsheet? Because there is no way that users will keep doing this, and we're going to lose them all. And I wasn't, I was an engineer. Oh, you're just an engineer. You just don't know. And that was kind of my like, okay, I need to go learn your shit, because if I don't go learn how to do the spreadsheets to show you that you're wrong, you're going to get to keep winning. I get to say, with a little bit of pride that like, I think at least my instincts were right, because who still uses Real Player? It's kind of a fair statement for the room. It's kind of sad, but I think it really did come down to like too many decisions where you think about the business and not the user might have short-term positive implications and long-term negative ones. And so I took a sabbatical like 4 months away. And by the way, if you ever do have gaps in life, which I find that founders who like work 24/7 on their companies, when something doesn't work out, like you actually do end up with a little gap in life, like the best thing to do is like get away, like go travel. And so, after 5 years at Real, my wife had actually gotten laid off from her job, and we had a wonderful dog that died of a strange disease really quickly. And so we were like, okay, time for a reset in life. What should we do? I went to my boss and said, hey, I think it's time for me to leave. He was like, no, like we want to go travel. He was like, don't leave, just go for a while and then come back. And so we ended up taking a 4-month sabbatical, and we traveled from Japan down to New Zealand, about a month each in each country. And it was like this incredible journey that we did, when we were young. And now, we've been married for, there'll be 15 years in June, and like we still have this like incredible 4 months that we spent, every single day together. And like even if you're just doing it with friends or even alone, like I encourage everyone to do this when you get to a natural gap in life. That kind of kicked me back into like, okay, I need to go learn this business stuff. And so I came back and applied to business school at the very last minute. Was lucky to get in. If anybody here does want to go to, who wants to go to business school someday? Anyone? Yeah, one. The deadline is January 1st. So just so you know, because like I applied in like March. And so they let like one person into Stanford and like 7 people into Berkeley. So I got lucky enough to get into Berkeley. My wife wanted to come back down here. And I started a business school. And I learned 3 great things at business school. One is I learned how to network, because I met this guy at business school, and he was like hardcore. And he basically, I met him and I was like, oh, what are you doing this afternoon? And he was like, I was like, do you want to go like chill or play basketball or whatever? And he was like, no, I'm going to go like call these 10 people and like ask them questions about their career and like get advice from them. I'm like, this was nuts. Like, I was like, you're super hardcore. And then he scared me into wanting to do it too, to go like network and meet all these companies. And like, he's still one of my great friends. He's actually a senior director and runs a lot of ad stuff at Twitter now. He founded a company, Twitter ended up buying it, and he sort of has risen up at Twitter, and it's awesome. But he scared me into networking. But what he really showed me wasn't, oh, you got to go and like sit and go through a call list of stuff, is that you have to reach out. Like, you don't learn if you don't reach out, and you don't, get connected. You don't get more information if you're not doing that. Like all of you who are already joining Boost start to understand the value of that. The second thing I learned at business school was spreadsheets. Like I just learned like how to actually open them up and make models and do basic things, which, you know, I only did one semester, so I dropped out. But even in that one semester, just going from no knowledge to some was great. And then the last thing that was really useful for me was I learned how to read like 10Ks and quarterly filings and S1s for companies. And like who here's ever read an S1, which is the filing when you go public? So that's a few of you. It should be all of you, by the way, because if you're founding a company, one of the best things you should do is read an S1, which is how a company talks about itself going to the public markets. Because I find that the S1 is basically where all of our cool tech juice, where we're like, oh, we're making this product to change the world, has to get distilled for Wall Street to say, this is an enterprise that makes money. Because what you forget about a company is the way a company works, and there's all these like laws about a company, you're probably incorporated in Delaware as a C Corp or whatever. But a company is basically just an entity that is supposed to like take in a bunch of money, deliver some service, and then spit out more money than it does to its investors and shareholders. And like, if you think about the price of a share of stock, it's basically someday this company is going to give me that much cash. So it's basically the present value of the cash you're going to get from the company. And that's exactly, so like when stocks go up, it's because everybody thinks, oh, this company's actually going to dividend out more cash over time in the future. And when the price of a stock goes down, it's like, actually, they're going to deliver less cash than we thought they were yesterday because stuff's slowing down and they won't have this. And so like when you understand how Wall Street values companies, it completely, I don't know, at least for me, it was like transformative to help me understand like how we think about the stuff that we build. And while it's awesome that we build products that change the world, eventually they do have to be enterprises that throw off cash because that's how everybody else is going to value them. And even as an investor now, like as I look at everything, it has to be, how do we, how does the thing eventually throw off cash that will get us our equity value out and eventually other shareholders will want to buy it. So those are the three things that I really got out of business school. But the other thing I learned was I really didn't need business school to go and work at a company that cared about users. I just had to leave real networks. And so I got really, this is kind of the second lesson for me is, and you guys, I think, how many of you guys are working on Bitcoin stuff? Okay, so pretty much all of you. Anyone VR or other stuff this time? He's got a little bit of that. So the other thing I did business school was I picked a trend that I thought like could be a really big deal in the future, which I think all of you guys have done with Bitcoin. And back in 2003, the consumer internet was mostly, I started business school in 2003, was mostly dead. And like the bubble had burst and like everyone who had done a website just felt like there's no way that we're ever gonna do this stuff or we'll ever make money. But Friendster and LinkedIn had just launched. And you guys remember Friendster? Yeah. Okay. So Friendster and LinkedIn had just launched. And they basically said, look at this crazy idea that like I know you and you know him and he knows her and she knows her and blah, blah, blah. Like, what if you actually connected all that up? So that instead of it just being sort of in our heads and in our like relationships, it's actually codified in software. What could you do? And Friendster was this amazing way to go from person to person to person and like, oh, hey, your friend is hot. Can I like meet her? Or whatever it was for sort of dating and much more social stuff. And LinkedIn was like, oh, we're not about that at all. We're about professional networking. I worked with him. And so, hey, do you know an engineer? Oh, look, I see you worked with this guy. Like it makes things much, much more efficient. And I was like, that felt like the future to me back in 2003. And like, I think it sort of like seems obvious to say this now, but trust me, like it was, I don't want to be online. I don't want my resume online was kind of the big thing about LinkedIn. I'm not looking for a job. Why would I do that? And like at Friendster, it was like, that looks silly. What a waste of time. Like, I don't want to share this stuff with other people. And so, it's kind of crazy, but my friend, the guy Amit, who I was talking about before, he and I wrote what we call like a point counterpoint for like the little business school newspaper. That tells you how dorky we were. I took the oh, this is going to be big, and he had to take the like, this is going to be really lame side. And so we wrote these articles and we were talking about it. And so I decided, you know what, I am in business school, but maybe I could go help these companies. And I used to be an engineer, I'm still a pretty good Windows engineer. Maybe I could just do something for them. So again, I cold emailed Friendster and LinkedIn. So this comes back to my like, you got to go out for what you want instead of let it come to you. I just cold emailed them both, jobs at Friendster, jobs at LinkedIn. And I actually had been lucky, I'd seen a little jobs posting for LinkedIn that they were actually looking for someone to do some Windows work on my Symbolic Systems mailing list. So I emailed them and I said, hey, I'm in the Valley now. I used to be in Seattle doing this real networks thing. I'd love to help you. And I got a response from LinkedIn because Reid Hoffman, do you guys know who Reid Hoffman is? Founder of LinkedIn. He had done the same major, the symbolic systems major at Stanford, maybe 7 or 8 years before me. And then the CTO had done it like 5 or 6 years before me. So they emailed me back and they said, hey, we'd love to chat. I didn't actually tell them I was in business school, and so I went and met them and said, look, how can I help? But by the way, I'm in business school, and I'm kind of don't really want to be an engineer anymore, but I'll totally help you on the side if I could do that. But and they were like, well, why'd you go to business school? I was like, because I want to be a product manager. And like over a couple conversations, they were like, well, why don't you just come here and be a product manager? And I was like, oh no, like I thought it was like a 2-year business school program to do it. And as the conversation went on at LinkedIn, I was like, wait, isn't this why I came to business school, to go be a product manager at a company that does this stuff? And it turned out just to be awesome. Like I had this like really stressful decision, do I drop out of business school or not? The head of admissions at the business school looked at me in the eye and he said, everybody who left during the bubble for a startup came back except one. I am sure you'll be back in a few years. And now I go back there to like do talks and a few other things. And, and then the other funny thing is, another one of my good friends there, that fall, so I left and joined LinkedIn. It was their first product manager. It was 15 people at the time. I'll tell a little story from LinkedIn. But one of my friends that fall at business school, when you're at business school, you still like want to go meet all the cool startups. And LinkedIn was actually getting more and more known by then. It actually raised a round from Greylock. And my friend said, hey, can we come do a project at LinkedIn? So they came to LinkedIn to do a project, on like the future of social networking or whatever. And they went back and they got a C+ from the professor because the guy said, this stuff will never make any money. This is ridiculous. And he totally like trashed social networking. And so that guy ended up going to work at LinkedIn, and he became like the number 2 to the CFO in the finance and operations world. And then when LinkedIn went public, he was there, and he and I just like had the best time laughing about that C+ and sent a note over to the professor, who kind of, he admitted, some things do surprise. But look, when I joined LinkedIn, like it was a very different world. Like this whole idea of like join my network, that was spammy. That was weird. That wasn't something people did. Everybody I talked to, I was like, oh, LinkedIn, come on, like upload, build a profile on the professional network. It's really awesome. You never know when you're going to need a job, and you don't know who knows who. And everybody just looked at me like, that's stupid. There's like monster.com if I want to look for a job, and I only go there when I'm looking because I don't want like my resume out there for my current employers to see it. Why would I be on LinkedIn? There was so much resistance. And what I learned from Reid back then is Reid had a very simple focus. He called it growth, usage, revenue. He said, look, over the next 10 years, we're going to focus on growth, then we're going to focus on usage, then we're going to focus on revenue. I used to call it GUR, for GUR. And we really just spent our time on growth. And we knew for LinkedIn one thing really important. If we got you into the network, then we knew that you were likely just to keep adding people over time, and that someday it might be useful to you. But we knew for most people in the world, LinkedIn actually wasn't useful on a daily basis. So all we knew is we had to get you in and get your current title in your current company, and then hope that when you change jobs or want to change jobs, you'd remember LinkedIn and you'd come back to it, and then you'd be more active. And so that was all we tried to do, was get everybody in. And then we knew this very small group of people like HR and recruiters and people trying to hire and founders trying to get leads to certain companies, or salespeople trying to get leads. They might use LinkedIn more as search. And so we really optimized around that. And like, we were truly viral. Like everybody talks about virality like it's a really good thing. It's really hard to be viral. LinkedIn though, over 90% of the people who signed up in the first 3 or 4 years of the company came to LinkedIn because of a viral invitation. And like, we were measuring things like, if I send an invitation, like how many invitations need to go to an email address before they even come to the site and click through? How do I make it so that when you come and sign up, it's more likely that you will click through and invite more people? Like, we found little dumb things for us in the testing. They're like, if I send the invitation at the end, it will make both of our, please come sign up for LinkedIn, it'll make both of our networks bigger. It turned out that caused the person who received it to be more likely to invite more people. And like, I just learned these things. Like, we didn't know these things, we didn't plan these things, but you learn these things. And I call that like inception, which is like the entire point of your product as you're trying to spread it is you don't just say, please come use my product, it's awesome. It's give them these little triggers on why it matters, what's going to matter, like how they're going to use it, how they're going to engage with it. And you can, like, I now like can sit with other people and like, you know, go through that sort of concept on like everything they're trying to do for viral and growth and PR, and it matters for all of those things. Like, you never know what the right ones are though, and until you keep trying them and testing them. But I saw, you know, firsthand that if you find the right triggers, you actually make a meaningful difference. And you got to remember, for something that's a viral system, getting 2% more people to invite or 1% more people to click through, like, is very much a compounding metric. And if you think about it, you guys are all tiny companies right now. Everything you do that causes anything to grow a little bit faster is a compounding metric because you're trying to create exponential growth. So those are, you know, we were just figuring this out. Look, I was an engineer, semester at business school, just a product manager, sitting there going into the data warehouse. We had like a data warehouse. I was like writing SQL queries to figure this stuff out, working with engineers. I wasn't coding myself anymore, but I was working with engineers every day to kind of figure this out. So fast forward, and now we have this other problem at LinkedIn, which is everybody's signing up, but they're like, I still don't want to be on a job site. So we faked them out. We created a job site underneath LinkedIn called LinkedIn Jobs. And everybody thought this was like our big revenue strategy, but really the reason we invested in it was we wanted to show the world that we were so much more than a job site, that a standard monster style job board was just a small part of LinkedIn. So built a whole job board, and it was really cool. When I was building the job board, everything we would design worked with like Reid Hoffman. He'd be like, make it more social. And like that was like, imagine that as just like a simple mantra. It's a job board like monster.com. You list a job, you have an application to a job when somebody applies, and it's just make it more social. So it was just a very, very simple thing. And then we had to go figure out how to make a job listing social. We figured out that if you show the name and face of the person, or we didn't have faces, if you show the name of the person and their current title, who's posting the job, that looks way more social and human than a flat job listing that you see on like Monster Career Builder. If you show, hey Josh, you might know 10 people at this company, that makes it feel way more social and connected than, again, a flat job listing. And so we just kept going through thing like that, you know, for the job listing and the application to make it more social. And Reid's feedback was never, you should make it red, you should do this, you should, you know, put the buttons here. His feedback was always like, that's not social enough. Let's brainstorm other ways that the job listing can be social. And so like as a CEO, when you're setting a vision, I found that just to be a very, very valuable framework for kind of thinking about every product. Like, you know, when you do have a bigger team, you don't need to get in the weeds and go like, actually, you should be like this. It was just, give me this framework. And at Nextdoor, do you guys know what Nextdoor is? Sort of like Facebook for your neighborhood. You know, I'm part of the board there. And at Nextdoor, like, we're trying to use that same metric of like, make it feel neighborly. So like, yeah, we're doing events, and yeah, we're doing classifieds, and yeah, we're doing, you know, services. How do we make it feel neighborly? Because when you take Craigslist and make it feel neighborly, it feels nothing like Craigslist, even though it's the same kind of thing, because Craigslist is like intentionally double-blind anonymous. And so those are the kinds of things that like we picked up. But then the other thing I learned about myself was I hated HR. Like I went to this like conference called the like Electronic Recruiters Exchange, which was like a room full of recruiters, like 10 times the size of this room. And that was like I was going to a bunch of their meetups and other stuff, and I was like, I don't want to do this for my career. Like, I just didn't want to be in HR, even though I liked LinkedIn a lot. I realized that like, I really wanted to go work on stuff that was more consumer-y, like Real Player, where you like listen to the music and the audio and video you cared about. And so I kind of knew I wanted to do something different, but I didn't know what. And this is the one time in my career that I didn't go outbound. And I started getting a bunch of inbounds on LinkedIn, in fact, that were like, hey, Josh, you know, are you interested in a new job? We'd love to talk to you. And I got one from a company that was called Zazzle. Have you guys heard of Zazzle? They do on-demand custom t-shirts. This is from Threadless, but like people can design shirts and everything else. Threadless was kind of one of our big competitors at the time at Zazzle. But they approached me and they said, look, we're looking for someone new in product. I was like, Zazzle, I've never heard of you. But you know, then they would sell me on the story. And the thing is, once you get caught in someone selling you on the story, it's pretty intoxicating and it's hard to kind of resist. So you really have to do your own homework before you sell. As I said, like if an investor pings you and then you go meet them, like of course they're going to do a good sales job because they're an investor. And you know what investor's job is to do a really good sales job to find companies they can shove money into. Like their job is, you know, hopefully to help afterwards, but really I have somebody else's money. I got to figure out where to stick it. And so anyway, Zazzle did that to me. And I fell in love and I got totally captivated by what they could become. And I was like, oh, this is much more fun than LinkedIn because instead of talking to recruiters, we're talking to designers, we're talking about products. They have this factory, and I went on a factory tour, and I was like, there's like a room full of people who are like, they're like inkjet printers that make t-shirts. It was like the coolest, like, it was like so fun. I was like, of course I got to go work on that, and I fell in love. And then what I didn't realize was it was actually not a healthy organization. It was run by a father and two sons who are incredible visionaries, but they struggled with how to build a great company around them and how to sort of build an executive team that makes executive leadership decisions and not what I'd call sort of the family barbecue, that they would decide things over the weekend and do this. And these were all things that, because I just got so caught up in the fervor of what Zazzle could be, I didn't do any of this research. And I didn't even realize the woman who hired me said, Josh, you're gonna like be like the first key product manager, and we're gonna help you hire other people. And then 3 weeks later, she's like, and would you interview this person? She might be your boss. And I was like, wait a sec, like I left this great job at LinkedIn to come here to do that. And so it's this kind of like, again, when someone pulls you in and just recruits you and sells you, it's very easy to get so intoxicated that I missed the rest of it. Now, the good story is, actually about 6 months later, that woman who hired me and about 10 other people she'd hired were all gone from the company. And I had a really great connection with the founders, and they asked me to stick around. And I ended up kind of doing what I started to, which is like really get to run product for a couple of years. And it was going well, but I think it wasn't going as well as I wanted to. I mean, Zazzle's still doing a couple $100 million a year in revenue, so like it's a great company. But I just realized like I wasn't quite getting what I wanted to out of it. It wasn't this sort of explosive growth I thought it should be. And because I'm not a founder, it's actually one of the benefits of not being a founder, but being a guy like me, is you can leave. Like if you're a founder, like it's your company all the way through the end. Like you can't leave. Once you sign up and shake the hand of investors who give you money, like you're in it to win it. Whereas a guy like, I signed a contract to go work there. It's at will. They can fire me. I can fire them. Like it's a totally different story. And so I got 2 speeding tickets driving home from work in the same month, and that's just a personal sign of like, if you're that stressed out driving home that you're like not noticing the cop once, maybe that's okay. But if you get a ticket and then you do traffic school, and then like 5 days later you get another ticket, it's a good life sign that you need to change things. So I decided at that point to say, okay, look, Zazzle's fine and they're gonna do fine, and like I'm actually in a really good position here, but man, I'm getting a little burnt out. I should go work at a slightly larger company. Remember, larger to me was like 500 people, not like Google size or anything else, because I still want to work at sort of this creation energy. And I said, the most interesting problem on the internet, this was now 2007, end of 2007, Facebook platform had just launched. And so I asked myself, what's the most interesting problem on the internet right now? And I thought it was social platforms. Because Facebook platform was like causing apps to go really, really big, but then be spammy and messy. And Google was trying to do this thing called open social. Anybody remember open social? Anybody remember MySpace that had a platform too? Who remembers MySpace's platform? Okay, and that's not that many of you, but like back in 2007 and 8, man, the MySpace platform, Facebook platform, what's gonna win? This was like every day, like we're talking about Bitcoin, or every day that we're talking about like Periscope versus Meerkat. It was like the tech always loves a war and always creates whatever the hype is today. Long game, you start to remember that like none of this shit matters, and it's really just what actually just gets built week over week, month over month, that actually does end up working. But I said, I want to go work on this stuff. And so I mentioned that to a friend who then had a friend who was running the platform at Facebook, who called me up and said, hey Josh, I hear you're thinking about stuff again. And I was like, oh man, like I was going to call you, thank you. And we had a couple of conversations, and I went in and interviewed and managed to convince them to hire me. And I think I was lucky because LinkedIn had become so much bigger that they thought I learned some really interesting stuff in the early days at LinkedIn. And because I was an engineer before, like they wanted people who had like technical experience. And so I had like the hardest, like brilliant Facebook engineer who was like grilling me about like the HTTP protocol and like how API calls would pass around. I think he was impressed that I was one of the first like product type of interviews who actually could like not get totally snookered by all of his questions. And so they ended up hiring me. And it was great because I hadn't even really started my search, but I would have gone out to MySpace, I would have gone out to Google Open Social and tried to work on one of these because I was like, I just really wanted to go work on that problem. And then I had this like hard breakup from Zazzle because I'd invested so much of my life, so much that I was like driving home getting speeding tickets from work because I just loved that company. But I realized that like for myself, I had to go to a bigger company. And then one funny thing happened at Facebook, which is I got reorged a week before I started, which kind of sucks. because I thought I signed up for one job, and they're like, actually, we're going to have you do this. And I went from sort of product management, which is with the engineers building stuff, to what I call much more of a platform relationships role. And what happened is they took my boss, who had been running product management, and asked him just to go do that. And you'll understand at big companies, who's worked at like a lot of your founders now, who's worked at like big companies before? Okay, so those of you in the room understand like reorgs and weird people shifts, and it just politics and that stuff just happens all the time. Which when you're a founder, you have so many other problems to worry about that like that's the least of your concerns. And so I kind of got unlucky in getting reorged before I started, and then I made a mistake, which is I never went and said, okay, I know you reorged the teams, but please, could I just do the thing that you hired me for? I never really went and pushed that and just stayed with the person who hired me, and just ended up like learned a good lesson about myself, which is like you got to be in a job that you're happy in. Like I did great. I'm proud of the work I did at Facebook. I was in this platform relationship. I worked with every developer on Facebook at the time, names like Slide and RockU and Zynga and iLike and Flickster and these kind of things that like if I had said these names in 2007 or 8, everybody would be like, those are like the hottest startups right now, because they all had hundreds of millions of users, all because of Facebook, but I was on the phone with them all the time, and Mark Pincus at Zynga used to like call me every day, and he was like, how do I get Facebook to do more with us? He was like, I'm spending $1 million a month on MySpace, and they like do a lot for us, but like Facebook won't even, I can't even get Cheryl to take my calls. I was like, how much do you spend on Facebook, Mark? And he was like, nothing, because it's so viral, it totally works. I was like, just start writing us $1 million a month checks. Like, doesn't matter if the ads work at all, and you'll get all the calls you want. And actually, he started doing that, and it worked. And Zynga then got some really deep partnerships with Facebook, and then got in trouble. And then Zynga missed the move to mobile, and now they're struggling. And now Mark this week just went back in to run Zynga. And like Mark's great. Like he's one of these kind of like guys who gets made fun of or whatever. But like you know what he is? He's a brilliant, hard-charging founder who just wants to make something great, like all of you, and just grinds it up and tries to do it. And we can get into that, but like I think there's so much negative press that happens about certain people for certain things. There are some cases where like that is really true, and like there was that video of that guy who like was injuring his wife that like just seems like unfathomable to me, and that probably is a really bad thing. But in the most case, like don't believe what you read in the press. Like pretty much everybody out there is trying to do the same thing you are. Take a great idea and make something great. But anyway, so I was doing that all the time, and then we realized at one point at Facebook, why are we dealing with Slide, Zynga, RockU, et cetera? Why aren't we dealing with eBay, Amazon, CNN, Huffington Post, like sites that are really big on the internet? And so I got to kind of spearhead this thing called Facebook Connect, which is now like the Facebook login button, and said, how do we actually build something that we can bring out to those partners? Because they're not going to build apps on Facebook, but we might as well help make their sites social with Facebook too. And if we can do that, we own a really more powerful thing for the internet. We let our users use Facebook everywhere, and we can bring all this content back into Facebook that makes the newsfeed better. And so I got to go work on that. And the funny thing that people forget with platforms is, well, Facebook was so big that of course you just launched this and everybody wants to use it. Like that's not true at all. There is no build it and they will come for users or for APIs or developer platforms or everything. So what we ended up having to do was go out there and take those partners and say, we'd love you to use our platform, and here's what we think you should do with it. I even hired a designer who would like design their sites for them that were social, and we'd be like, and in fact, we think this would be awesome for your users and ours. And because I was sort of a product manager before, it made it really fun and easy to go do that. And so that worked out. That ended up working out really well. And like, how many of you guys use Facebook authentication in your apps? Not as many as I thought. What do you guys use? If you don't use Facebook, do you just use no authentication at all? Twitter. How many of you use Twitter versus Facebook? Okay. How many of you use Twitter but not Facebook? Wow, that's not even a handful, which is crazy because there's like 1 billion people on Facebook. But that's sort of, but I got to learn, and I really learned how to do this. And then this thing called Huffington Post, who, like, does anybody know what the Huffington Post is? Like, we try to find, like, we wanted CNN to go social, but like CNN is slow, and they were the #1 news site at the time. I don't know if they still are, but they were slow, and they were like, every meeting I'd have with them would have like this many people in the meeting, and we'd be like talking about social and like explaining it to them, and then we'd have like 17 follow-up meetings, and like they would literally like get like one thing done. And then Huffington Post, which was like a fast rising news site at the time, the guy who was the CTO, he and I would jam on a whiteboard for like 2 hours. And then like 2 days later, he'd be like, look, Josh, look what we built. And it would like be amazing. And it would like start to show this stuff social. And then they launched it and their Facebook traffic just shot up. And I learned that like whenever you're building something new, you go for the B pluses, you don't go for the A's. Because the A's have their own shit going on and they don't have time to deal with you and they don't have time to really invest. But the guys that are like the B pluses, like Huffington Post, they care. They care about winning. They care about getting to the next level. And so they went really, really deep with us and it transformed their business. They ended up selling to AOL for like $300 million, but they're now estimated to be worth like $1 billion as part of AOL's overthing. And even that they've slowed down because all the really talented people left Huffington Post. And so it's just kind of this like, I just learned again these lessons of like when you're building a platform, you have to go out there and help everybody do it, and you have to get the partners who are motivated. Everybody thinks that, again, I want, and when you think about investors, I want the most famous guy in the world, and you know what? A lot of times what I tell my friends is like, you want the investor who has some momentum in their firm, but is young and is gonna work their butts off for you. Because at the time at which you're on top of the world, yeah, fine, you can get the top guys too, but you all work your way up together. So it's kind of where I translated back there. So I learned all that at Facebook, but I just was never happy in the platform stuff. So in 2009, I basically started using Twitter a lot and realizing, I said, look, I can't leave Facebook. It's gonna be a $100 billion company. It's like actually a $200 billion company. And I could never leave, but I could for Twitter. So I wonder if I can get into Twitter. So I started asking all my friends who could introduce me to Twitter. And this guy who came up to me, Adam at least met him briefly, said, oh, I've met Biz before. Let me email Biz for you. And he literally introduces me to Biz Stone. And Biz is like, oh yeah, we're looking for some people to help us on the platform. Why don't we connect? And so I had a recruiting meeting with Twitter. This is like spring of 2009. And they said, great, like let's stay in touch. And so I was like, oh, damn it, I didn't get that job. But I kept staying in touch and I kept helping out Twitter and I kept like pinging them every few months, and they weren't hiring anybody into product management. And then finally, like 5.5 months later, they're like, actually, Josh, we're thinking about product managers now. We like you. We like that you've kind of hung around and kept helping us and kept, they would like ask me Facebook questions occasionally because they wanted to like integrate better with Facebook, because Twitter was like a small company trying to figure this stuff out. And then eventually they said, actually, why don't you come back in for an interview loop? And I went back in. I met Ev Williams and Biz Stone and Jason Goldman, who's a VP product. And then they made me an offer, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I could not leave Facebook, but I would for Twitter. And I joined there about 80 people in the company. And at the time of 2009, like there were these studies that would show, they would like say, how many people have heard of Facebook? And it was like 80% of the US had heard of Facebook. And they'd say, how many people use Facebook? And like 40% of the US would admit to using Facebook. And then they would use Twitter, and they'd be like, 70% of the US had heard of Twitter. So how many people use Twitter? And it was like 7% or 6%. And I thought, okay, they got some work to do, but that's still good. I went into Twitter. Facebook had about 300 million users when I left. I went into Twitter. I was like, how many users do we have? And they were like, there were like maybe 60 million users who'd signed up for Twitter at that point, and there were 10 who were active. Like the Facebook number was 300 million active users. I don't even know how many had signed up. The Twitter number was 10 million active. And I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? But Ev, Ev and Jason, and Ev said to me, he was like, look, everybody signs up for Twitter, but nobody sticks around. Help us fix that. And because I'd gotten to do all this viral stuff at LinkedIn, and because I'd been at Facebook Connect, and I'd really worked with every other developer and understood how they grew, I was like, well, look, and I'd watched the Facebook growth team, which just did an amazing job growing Facebook. I was like, look, we need to start a little stealth team called Growth, and we just work on things. And we're just going to work on thing by thing by thing and try to make Twitter grow. And we did a data analysis, and we understood a couple things about users. It sounds intuitive now, but like if we get people to follow more people, they actually have a better Twitter experience and they come back more often. And if we get you to have enough people following you back, especially those who like they're in your address book or something, or you're in their address book, then you're more likely to get to use Twitter. And so just with those couple of like key learnings, we just tried to build feature after feature that helped him do this. Rebuilt the onboarding flow. I have this whole thing I can talk about or have talked about online about onboarding and how you teach people how to get into your product, and that every onboarding flow that I sign up for a lot of products these days, everybody does like a little flip tutorial. Terrible, because nobody reads that stuff and they flip through it. But a flow that is actually like 10 steps long but asks you one question, then another, then another, then another, you actually get engaged with the product, and the answers to your questions help the product get set up better for you. and you really get engaged. The number one product I would say to go sign up for, just to prove this point, is one called Lumosity. Who uses Lumosity? Okay, you got like 1 or 2 people. So Lumosity will make your brain smarter. Sounds like total BS, right? I think it is BS, kind of. Like, that's what the data says. But I tell you this, and then you go download the app, and I'll tell you what the app does when you first sign up for it. It says, which of these things do you think you'd like your brain smarter, or your brain to be exercised and get better at? Please, select which ones, then we'll go to the next screen. And there are things like, do you want to pay attention better? Do you want to forget where your keys are? And they're like these things where you're like, oh my God, I totally want all these things. And then you go to the next screen, and they're like, do you want to sleep better at night? And have your brain able to solve spatial problems more quickly or do better math in your head? And you're like, of course. And then by the end of this process of going through Lumosity, you've gone through seven screens. You're gonna sit there and you're gonna oh my God, if I don't use this app every day, my brain is gonna decay on every single one of these things. And you start freaking out and you totally get in this daily addicted habit. And the reason I use this example is it's actually a really good example to prove the point, but it's true for every product that when it takes you through these steps and introduces you to what the product's about and gives you these questions that you actually have to consciously answer and process, that's how you learn a product. And everybody who's signing up for a product, or 90% of the people when they come to sign up for a product, they're actually there because they heard about it and they're curious and they want to use your product. They're actually there with the best intentions. They're not there for a slam bam, thank you ma'am, get me into this product. They're actually there to go, what is this thing? Why should I use it? Maybe it's interesting. And so you have their attention to actually help them use it. And so we spent a ton of time, and so actually invest in that moment of your product, because way too few products do, and this is why most products die, including Twitter, where everybody signed up and didn't stick around. The nice thing with Twitter was, even if you did a ton of work, the Twitter experience was magical. And so if you really got to that point of nirvana where you were checking it all the time, there's really good content and you were having fun with it, Twitter's magical. And I still think it's probably the most magical product on my phone that I use every day. Is I open up Twitter and I get everything I want to from the world, and I can jump in and have some fun conversations with people and friends and other things, and then I'm out. And it's just but the setup cost is super high. And so we were lucky that we had enough people who did it that we then had time to make the product easier and easier for everybody else. And what I'm a little bit sad about is I think they haven't done as good a job in the past 3 or 4 years that I think we did in those couple of years to keep making it easier and easier, because it should be mainstream by now. Whereas Facebook has just done an incredible job making it so that a rural farmer in Botswana gets on Facebook and actually has a decent experience these days. It's crazy. And I hope the same thing happens for Twitter. But so I learned all this great stuff, and we got to do this at Twitter, and it was really working. And then I learned this other weird side, which is, you know what? Even when companies get successful, there's a lot of crap and a lot of mess and a lot of nonsense that happens. And when more and more money comes into the picture, the knives come out even more. And there's a whole book called Hatching Twitter that will tell you the Twitter soap opera. And it's only, I lived it, and it kind of made me cry when I got to the end of the book, just because I had gotten fired from Twitter, and I missed all the things that I really wanted Twitter to become. But when you read the book, what it just reminds you of is this is a successful company. This is Twitter. This is one that's it's a $30 billion company. It went through all this drama, all this infighting, all this bad stuff, and it happens all the time. So try to be more drama free and try to just realize that only we can just be better and do it even better the next time, and that happens everywhere. But it's a good read just to understand the implications of all this stuff when money comes into the picture. Anyway, so I was proud of everything that was happening at Twitter. Ev Williams got kicked out as CEO. That's what the book's about. And other people came in. Jack Dorsey came back in, and Jack wanted to go run all the product. And he looked at me and a couple of the other really senior product folks, and he just, he needed people who were on his team. As a founder, as a company, you need to edit the team to be the people that you want, that you trust. And I got the sense from the first day Jack was really back in the company that I was not one of those people. And so a few months later, he fired me. And it sucked, because I love Twitter, and I loved Twitter, and I didn't, I wanted to go make Twitter huge. And when I went to go work at Twitter, I was I'm done changing jobs. I was at LinkedIn for a little too short. I was at Zazzle for too short. I was at Facebook for too short. But Twitter is where I just want to be for the next 10 years. And then, that all changed and got cut off. And yet I said, look, I just hope that they make Twitter awesome and that they make Twitter better. And if they can do things that better without me there and Jack can really do it, that's great. And then I was a little bit sad because they shipped this feature that I had started and they didn't change it at all. And like you know as well as I do, like every time you build a feature, you keep changing it all the way until you ship it. And they shipped it like, it looked exactly like the last mock-up, before I got fired. And I was just like, come on guys, you can totally fire me, but at least make it better than what I left you with. Because there's no way that like I would have been happy shipping that. And the other sad thing was like Jack even didn't really sticking around at Twitter, and so kind of it was like Jack was gonna come in and like be the visionary and that didn't even happen. So those kind of things bummed me out, but such is life. And so I said, this is now just how I ended up in venture capital. Everybody's got a really unique story for venture capital. But I said, look, my whole career has been about finding awesome things and getting to help the founders build them great. And I've actually gotten to do this on 3 different companies, LinkedIn, Facebook's platform, and Twitter, where I was part of it when it was messier, and when I left it was less messy, and the chance of it becoming something really big deal, I felt like that was gonna happen. And even in 2011, LinkedIn had gone public, but Facebook and Twitter weren't obviously public or whatever yet. So still wasn't quite clear that they were all as big winners as I think it's more clear now. But I was like, look, I've been part of these things. Maybe there's a job for somebody like me that for whatever reason I don't end up staying at the company a long time and I'm not a great operating executive, but where I can really help in those kind of early messy days. I thought, maybe that job's venture capital because it doesn't seem like VC life is cool. You run around and meet people and do random talks and then you invest money and you have billions of dollars at your disposal. I was like, it seems like a sexy job. But I didn't really know what I was getting into. But I was really lucky. I'd worked for Reid Hoffman in the early days at LinkedIn, and he had then become a partner at Greylock. And actually, David Z, who runs Greylock, I had met him when he invested in LinkedIn, and he and I we had coffee sort of every year. And what you'll find is there'll be people as you're young and you're early in your careers, find those people who will just have coffee with you every year, every 18 months, and just give them an update on life and tell them what you're thinking about and what you're doing now, and ask them for just a little bit of advice. And I'm now sort of one of those people who starts to have those meetings with younger folks. And I love it because that's sort of how you build these connections and these sort of, life is a series of dots that become lines. And so because I'd known David and Reid, they said, look, just come hang out here and you never know what'll happen. Maybe you'll figure out if you can be VC. Maybe you'll figure out that you're kind of ready to go back and be a real executive and stay somewhere for a long time. Maybe you'll find something else in the startup world. And so a couple years in at Greylock, what I realized was I love diving into companies and problems and helping them figure stuff out. And I found that actually because of my experience, I got to have a lot of great conversations with companies that weren't just, hey, tell me what you're doing. Oh, that's cool. But hey, let's go try to solve this problem together. Let's go work on this. And Greylock had some portfolio companies that I was helping out. One's called, Nextdoor. And a few other ones that I would basically go every week and spend just some time on a couple things and found that even me spending a little bit of time once a week was valuable for them and it didn't need to be me working there full time. And I also figured out that the entrepreneurs that I really wanted to go work with, the companies I would have gone to join as a employee, I was realizing they would actually love to work with me as an investor and take Greylock's money to kind of have that. One of the ones, I didn't end up getting to invest, but Snapchat's one where I got very, very close to the team and said, I think that's going to be a huge thing. And we literally threw an interception at the 1 yard line, in terms of not closing the deal. But I'm still very close with that team because really realized that thing, this little dumb idea, photos that disappear, turns out not to be a dumb idea. Turns out to be actually a very profound, different way to connect that we can only do because we have digital content that actually can expire. And it changes everything in the way that we kind of act with each other and what we'll share. Stuff that you would never put on Google, you'll actually put on Snapchat because it goes away. And just a really profound transformation for kind of media and everything else. And so then the Greylock guys were like, hey, Josh, maybe you are pretty good, maybe you can get good at this. Venture capital is a 10-year thing and you still don't know if you're any good or actually had good results. And it's founding a company, in a few years if you're actually good at it because the company's working or it's not. Venture capital, Dig was an amazing win for the investors for a long time until not, and then it ended up losing money. The amount of money that was put into Dig was more than what the investors got back out at the end. So you kind of just realize that you just don't know until you know. But they said, Josh, give it a shot because all venture capital is we have to take bets on founders that they're going to build something great. Senior venture capitalists take bets on junior folks to say, we're going to give you a bunch of money and let you go try to invest in companies, and we'll see if you end up returning money or giving us a big crater. But if we take enough bets on enough young people, hopefully some of them will find the right companies that will return everybody a lot of money, and then it works out. And so that's been my pattern. And look, the last thing I'll say is like, I found that the thing I get most excited about is the same stuff I've been excited about my whole career. The future of media, the future of content, the future of social platforms, the way that we kind of connect and be more human with each other, are kind of the things that just get me really excited. And so I'm involved with Nextdoor. I invested in Medium. Who here uses Medium or writes on Medium? Awesome. Please write all your blog posts on Medium. We're going to make it better and better and better. And I get to work with Ev Williams again, which is awesome. I invested in a company called Super, or Jelly, and now it's Super, which is founded by Biz Stone, who's another co-founder from Twitter. And like Super, if you haven't played with it, it's a pretty cool kind of expression thing. And and on that one, like it started with Jelly, but I was just excited. Like Biz had a bunch of ideas, and his statement that got me hooked into wanting to invest in him and work with him again was, we now live in a connected society where we have 1 billion people who are all connected all the time. Can't we find ways to make the world better because of this? And so like the original idea with Jelly was people can ask a question and get help, and we've become a help network. With Super, he's trying to kind of recreate empathy and let people express themselves in a new way and get all this kind of emotional positive feedback. It's a great vision and a guy to go work with. And then I invested in a company called Meerkat that I'm sure you guys have heard of if you've been reading any of the recent tech press. The idea that I can just whip out my phone and be broadcasting live and sharing with the world. But what Ben Rubin, the founder, got me really excited about wasn't like live broadcasting, but what he calls spontaneous togetherness. If we think about most of our phones, we're tapping on a screen, and we think we're being social because I'm like liking your photo or double tapping your Instagram photo. But like these are kind of like asynchronous moments of connection. And what Ben's excited about is like when I pull this out and start broadcasting, not only are all of us in the room in this moment together, but everybody who's watching is in the same moment with us at the same time, and it makes the world a little bit less alone. And like that idea, I just think is so profound, and like we haven't thought about how our phones kind of bring us all together at the same time. And so he's got me sold on kind of the fact that like this can happen now. The technology finally works. He's got super fancy cameras there doing recording, but like I can whip out my phone and be broadcasting pretty darn well because the network bandwidth supports it, the phones support it, and the phone cameras are actually like really high quality. Look, and then the second thing is, 3 years ago, if I like pulled out a camera and was like, hey, I'm broadcasting to the world, you guys would be like, stop that, turn that off. That's awkward. But now we're so used to selfies and Instagrams and Snapchats, everything that like live broadcasting doesn't actually seem like a crazy step on top. And so, it got me totally excited about Meerkat. And then the other thing that I thought in venture was like invest in what you know. And like I like to think that like I've built more and been part of more of these companies than just about any other investor. So if you want somebody who can really help you, who's been through the trenches, hopefully you would pick me over other investors who might not have just been in it as much to be able to help you. Then I said, look, but as a good VC, you got to also have some predictions on the future. Can I find any areas where nobody knows so that we can all just go make it up and learn it together? Some people have totally picked Bitcoin as a place where they're investing a lot of time and energy. Some people have picked drones, and I got really excited about the Internet of Things and kind of the future of connected hardware and the reality that like these doors, these locks, these lights, these like everything right now, like it's still just connected to the power grid or it's a mechanical thing, but it has no state that goes out to the rest of the world. And that's all going to change because we have chips and sensors and ubiquitous Wi-Fi and everything that like transforms that. And when it does, it creates a whole different world. So I led our investment in a company called Smart Things, which Samsung ended up buying to be the center of their Internet of Things, connected home strategy. And I'm looking at another kind of hardware thing right now because I just get really excited with what the future could be there and figure, again, there aren't any other investors who are like great at that because nobody's really helped build those companies yet because they haven't really been built, outside of like Logitech, which like makes mice and, and stuff like in monitors and stuff like that. So I figured there's like a lot of room to go learn there. So that's how I kind of think about, the investment world now too. So that was a lot of talking, and you guys were all very patient with me to listen and answer my questions along the way. But I'd love to take any of your questions on any of the stuff I talked about or financing and kind of the market and how you raise money and stuff too.
So I was really interested in what you said earlier when you mentioned your ad and page characters as well. Is that there's a lot of room to probably still grow the kind of live streaming. In Bitcoin, I guess when I'm trying to build a company, I want to say that there's lots of room for other companies to be involved. It always feels like everyone's sniping at this wallet or that exchange or whatever. And we try to do our best to partner with different companies that we really like and people we really like with them. But in the end of the day, we're still trying to build our one little thing. But I'd really like to build a network or community of other companies and products that we like to work with. But I just try to figure out how to balance like the time commitment to that versus just having to build my own company.
Well, look, I mean, there's a lot packed in there. There was kind of like, how big is the space of Bitcoin and what areas will it, where areas will companies, be able to serve? And then the second is for kind of you as a founding and prioritizing your company. I'll start with the second. Look, this is the crappy thing out of being a founder is like, you really can only do one thing well, which is like drive your company to be more successful. Like that is such an all-encompassing fight against the world to make one little thing become something huge that like, it's very, very hard to like also foster community and also support everything. And that's okay. Like if you're successful in life, there will be plenty of time for you to be a great patron of the world and a patron of the community and give back. But I even found this with watching Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, watching Ev Williams and BizStone at Twitter, watching Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn, watching the Zazzle founders, they're the Beaver family at Zazzle. Like part of the reason that they got to be as successful as it is, they were maniacal on the thing that they were doing, and like only that, and everything they would do kind of feeds into part of that. And it's interesting when you talk to Reid right now. I mean, he's still involved at LinkedIn, but he's not working there day to day anymore. But he was like, like I look at his calendar, and he like has literally like breakfast every day, dinners every day. He has more than I do. And I'm like, well, what are you doing that for? And he was like, well, every single evening and every single morning, it's either, is this valuable for Greylock or is this valuable for LinkedIn? And like, that's all that he does. Now, he's also trying to give back to the world, so probably about 10% of his time, 20% of his time at it. If you're taping it, like, ignore this whole section because I don't really know. But like, he does a lot of things that are kind of like good for the world as well with like one allocation of his time now that he's, he has a foundation and like he's trying to do things for the foundation too. But 5 or 6 years ago, it was like everything was like for LinkedIn or for Greylock. And I think that's gotta be true. Now, in terms of how do you create an opportunity and explain why the space is so big to support other things? I mean, in Bitcoin, it feels like you guys have a couple giants now, whether that's Coinbase and BitPay and blockchain and Zappo, which Greylock's investors in. You really have to basically have a thesis that you can articulate that says, here's why those are gonna be great, but here's why this thing I'm doing has a whole world that nobody's touched yet that's gonna be even bigger. And in fact, if they're successful, we're more successful. And if nobody's successful because of Bitcoin, that's fine. Every day at LinkedIn, people are like, back then it was Friendster, and then it was MySpace, and it was Facebook. They'd be like, isn't there just one social network to rule them all? Why is LinkedIn even relevant? Because won't Facebook just add jobs as a separate tab one day? Or why won't MySpace just add careers as a separate thing? And like, MySpace did launch a career section at one point, and Facebook has gone on and off with doing this, or platform apps have tried to do this on Facebook. And we always had to say, no, look, we think that there's a part of your life that's your work life that's a very important network that just operates differently, and we're gonna crush that, and we're gonna own that. And you have to do that. So look, if you are trying to be another wallet though, like it's kind of, do you guys know the blue ocean, red ocean concept at all? Okay, so this is actually a useful concept that I generally hate these business books and these business concepts and don't find them valuable. Although I'll give you the couple books that I find that I have read. But blue ocean, red ocean's been a thing that I've talked about a bunch. That it seems to work for me. The idea of a blue ocean is a blue ocean's clear, like there's clear sailing ahead, and there's nobody in your way. And if you just get there, and you're defining something new, kind of in business. If you have blue ocean, a red ocean is considered a red ocean because there's chum in the waters and the sharks are eating whatever it is, and there's just blood everywhere from the sharks, and so that's why it's a bloody red ocean. And what that tends to mean in the business world is there's a lot of competition there. There's a lot of companies there. The way that you win is you have to fight through it and be the biggest of the things that are already there. And so if you think about like social networking in 2003, it was a blue ocean because there was nothing big in social networking. And it was like either you sail ahead and you actually define social networking or not. If you think about messaging today, there's WhatsApp and Snapchat and Facebook Messenger and Kik and yada, 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 yada. And you start going down this list and you realize like, hey, I'm gonna build a next great social messenger. Like, that's a very red ocean. Now you can still get through a red ocean if you spend more, earn more, do more, win faster, be faster, like whatever it is. But it's much, much harder in the red ocean. And so investors tend to do two kinds of bets. We tend to bet on things that feel like they're a blue ocean, that they're maybe sailing ahead. Nobody knows if it'll be a big company, but if it is, it gets very exciting. And like, so for me, that's Meerkat. No one's won in live video yet. And the idea that Twitter's gonna make a huge bet with Periscope's awesome, but nobody's won. So the ability for Meerkat to be awesome too is great. Now if Twitter had a huge product already in live video, maybe you don't invest in Meerkat a year from now. Maybe that's actually scary. But like right now, it's a great blue ocean, and yeah, just because it is head to head with one other thing, and other companies will likely launch stuff as they see it more and more successful, there's a chance to go with something big. Magic, which you guys use Magic, you know what that is? That's that new like text and say I want a pizza and then it gives you a pizza. Like it's rumored that they raised a bunch of money from Sequoia, and I don't know if that's true, but that's one that like a lot of VCs and I've talked about. That's another blue ocean. Nobody's figured out this conversational metaphor for commerce, but man, it seems like that's a pretty powerful thing, and if somebody owned it, they could own a really big company, so they'll make that kind of bet even without metrics. In the red ocean, you basically say, oh man, I don't know if anything can win. There's a lot of stuff out there. And even in Bitcoin, blue ocean 2 years ago felt like wallets, and then Coinbase and Zappo and blockchain and whatever got big. Today, you're like, those are already big. It would feel like a red ocean to say, I'm gonna go build another wallet from like scratch. So what you then have to do is get momentum. And so in the red ocean, people invest on momentum. They invest on the fact that you are growing quickly, you're growing in a way that's compounding, you're growing in a way where it's very organic, and you're growing in a way where it's clear that even though you're in this red ocean, people are choosing this product instead of other ones, and you really have to have that momentum. So like Snapchat's a great example. When Snapchat was growing, everybody's like, well, don't we already have Facebook and Instagram and everything else? And they were like, yeah, but this one's really growing too and compounding because it does this thing differently. So they actually will use Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. It wasn't like there was a blue ocean for ephemeral photos that anybody really believed in, but it was clear that it was really just growing and compounding on its own. Yik Yak is sort of the same way. Do you guys use Yik Yak, anyone? Not really, but do you guys know what it is, generally? So like Yik Yak said, well, God, there's already like Twitter and these other social products and everything else, you know, and Secret and Twitter, like whatever, how is Yik Yak really gonna grow? But it was like they were figuring us out on colleges and becoming a primary thing on colleges, and so they were really able to grow through the red ocean. And so that's where like the red ocean, you can actually do the breakout. So if you're in wallets, you're gonna have to prove to me that you have the kind of data and network that's sort of a, you know, momentum to win in wallets. But if you're like, here's this thing on Bitcoin that nobody's touched before, then you have a chance to define something new. That can I answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Cool.
Awesome.
So you've dealt with a lot of other investors that you've seen, and so I was just thinking, what are your advice for a lot of us are about to be picking investors?
Yeah.
Or finding them. But, like, what are your advice when it comes to picking? Like, how open.
It's advice about picking investors. So there's a lot of great investors out there. There's a lot of crappy ones. There's probably more crappy ones than great ones. And it's hard to know when they meet you because investors are fundamentally salesmen. We're all selling money. And so you should basically assume that the first date, it's like a first date. Like whoever goes on a first date and doesn't like try to like wear their best clothes and like find out the wittiest things that they can say and like, you know, like have the best, oh my God, that's so funny. Or like, I love that show too. When like, you know, in reality you don't, but you're trying to build rapport with somebody. So like all investors are gonna do that. So just know that and don't let it fool you. And by the way, if you see any like flaws in some of those first conversations, that's a big red flag. Because if it's bad on the first date, like it ain't getting better. Usually, there's some investors, by the way, who are like nerdy and awkward, who actually are fantastic, where the first date you're actually like, ooh, that guy was like trying to be too smart or didn't feel right, but then you like actually realize that they're actually awesome. So like, like I'm giving you kind of both sides of advice because that's what happened, but just know that like know that. And once you know that, you're actually empowered to like read through a bunch of it. The second thing is talk to people who you trust who know. So you've got a guy like Adam who's running Boost, whose dad's a VC and has been around venture capital for way longer than I have. Like, he can tell you better who the really great ones are and aren't, and because reputation does matter and chatter does go through the community. The third thing is talk to people who've actually taken money from the person. And if you ask somebody like, who do you work with a lot? They should tell you some companies. You should ask those founders what they think of the person. Now, again, most founders are going to say generally nice things because nobody wants to be the person who shits on someone who gave them money. But look for the signs of like, oh my God, they like show up all the time. I email them, they're like super fast respond. Or, yeah, they helped me with 2 connections, but then I emailed them 5 other times and never heard back. Like, no one's going to say, and they suck, you shouldn't take money from them. Because they're going to say, oh, you totally should. They helped me those 2 times. But count all those flags because they do actually matter and add up. You know, and then at the end of the day, like, you got to trust your gut because the entire point of a company is you're betting on your gut that the ideas that you have can become something huge, and that when you meet somebody and you hire them, you're betting on that person you hire to be great. And like every single decision, as much as you can try to be smart and get all the data points in the world, you eventually have to make a call. But get an informed gut before you trust your gut. Like, that's the best way you can make any decision is get informed, be very thoughtful about, I'm choosing this person knowing that I heard these strengths and these potential weaknesses, and now I'm going to go work with them. So.
One more question. You've seen a lot of companies grow. Any common mistake that you can point out that most of them made that is an absolute no-no for like an early company?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is this thing I keep talking about just like get really informed and be deliberate about the decisions you make. The companies that succeeded did that pretty much every single time. You'd say, why are you doing this? And they always had an answer. And an answer that was measurable later. Like, I'm doing this because I think this investor will help me with this, this, and this. So that 6 months from then, you can be like, did that investor help you with those things? No, they didn't. But at the time, you thought they would, and you made the most informed decision that you could. A lot of the companies I've seen fail, you're like, why'd you do that? And they're like, oh, we had a great meeting. And they aren't as deliberate. So like, number one is just, you know, you got to trust your gut and you got to be really deliberate about every decision. The second big mistake that everybody makes is build it and they will come. And they just, like, a great company does 2 things. It does more than that, but it's just 2 fundamental things. It builds and provides a great product and service to the world, and then it gets a really, really, really good system for getting that product in people's hands. And like, that second part is just as important as the first. And like, Apple is like a great example. They build the fucking, like, the coolest products in the world, but they spend as much time in that company on how do they get that product in your hands? How do they get you aware of it? How do they do their one presentation moment that's what inspires the world because they found that that works for them? How do they get the things from China in your hands as fast as possible? How did they go build all these stores because they realized they were sucking at getting their products in people's hands? So Steve Jobs said, we should have our own stores because that'll get the product in people's hands. But they have invested probably more money as a company in how they get the product in people's hands versus just the actual product. And I think most companies that is true, and most founders and most people that I ever meet don't think about it that way and don't spend enough time on the growth. Remember LinkedIn, growth, usage, revenue. We actually spent less time on building a great product than figuring out how to get the damn viral network to grow in the early days because we realized that that was so important to get us back to the right to go create all these great products. And then one other thing I add on to this is not only is getting the product into people's hands matter, but teaching them how to use it and continuing to engage it. And so one thing I like to say is Apple does these amazing TV commercials, right? And everybody thinks they're to sell new iPhones, and they're totally not. They're actually to take everybody who has an iPhone and get them to do more with it. I heard a note from them once, from somebody there, that the amount of FaceTime calls used to spike every single time that they would show that commercial where like the kid or the daughter or whatever was calling the soldier overseas. Because Apple wasn't trying to say, go buy an iPhone so you can FaceTime. they were trying to say, everybody who has a phone, you might not have thought about using FaceTime, or you might not really have known how to use it or known how valuable it was. But watch this incredibly emotional story. Of course you're going to want to pick out your phone and realize you can do it too. And the moment that Apple reminds you can do that, and then you do it and you have that magic moment, you then tell everybody else how great the iPhone is, and then you do it. Android phone, there's never any of these commercials or any ways that remind you how amazing the Android experience is. So nobody then has enough of those moments that they go and tell that, whereas Apple does. And so it's just putting the product in people's hands, teaching them how to use it. And so I just think like those are the two kind of big mistakes. And look, most fail anyway. So failure is never a like badge of shame. Now, I'll give you the counter to that in a second, but like failure is never a badge of shame. I was talking with a good friend of mine who was bummed because he started a company a few years ago and it hasn't gone as well as he'd hoped. And he was like, oh, but look at like, Evan Spiegel and Kevin Systrom. And I was like, look, you're gonna name 7 people. Like there are 7 people in the world who like founded a company and hit it out of the park, like out of the world, like off the planet, like who just hit it. You're not one of 7 people in the world. Like maybe you're also not like Arnold Schwarzenegger or like whatever, but like we can't run around going, I'm not one of 7 people. Like we tried. And like if you try to get it in people's hands and spend as much time on that, if you're just really deliberate about every decision you make, you're gonna take the best shot possible. And that's all you can hope for. And like as venture capitalists, when we invest, that's all we hope for too. So cool. Thank you.